Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon has arrived on Netflix and just a handful of theatres around the globe, and after watching it, I think it's another visually great film from the director, but one that is ultimately quite disappointing in a lot of other areas. When it comes to this first version of Zack Snyder's vision for Rebel Moon, I thought the writing of characters specifically was something that was just lacking here, and for me, it deeply affected my connection to the storytelling arc of the movie and the overall ambition to make this a fresh take on the sci-fi genre from the films that inspired it. Zack Snyder's visual direction, world building, and the lead performance of Sofia Boutella are really the only things that I confidently enjoyed after watching it, and I just hope that the longer director's cut is one that improves the other parts of the film too. I personally love a lot of Zack Snyder's previous films, and I think he's given us some absolute classics throughout his career, but when it comes to Rebel Moon, I think this had the potential to be so much better. So in this video, I'm going to be listing the main reasons why I think Rebel Moon Part 1 was a flawed science fiction epic, but one that could be fixed by the upcoming second part, or that hard R director's cut that Zack Snyder has recently spoken about. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my future content on director-driven films like Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into my thoughts on Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. So when it comes to Zack Snyder, you'll know that more than most, I've liked or really enjoyed a lot of his films. Man of Steel is one of my personal favourite comic book films. I thought the director's cut of Justice League was great, and films like Watchmen, 300, and Dawn of the Dead are some of my absolute favourites too. Like the Snyder cut of Justice League, I've also preferred a lot of the director's cuts for his films, where we see his full vision come to life, not being held back by any age rating, running time, or particular studio that wants a more PG-13 or stripped back version of the vision that they initially agreed to. Now, being with Netflix, I thought that Snyder may have that greater creative control, and we get the intended cut of his new film straight out of the gate. But with Rebel Moon, it's another case of we'll need to see the extended version, because this feels like another inferior take on an idea that had a lot of potential. It's important to note that while I think a director's cut would need a lot to improve what this first version of the film gave us, that Zack Snyder has just come out and confirmed that there is a longer R-rated director's cut, and that he thinks it's the best version of the project out there. After watching the film and thinking about this, it annoys me because I can't quite think of a reason why we wouldn't get that version of the film right away, especially as Snyder has much more freedom over at Netflix. And with this movie lacking in originality, lacking in its script and characterization, it feels like a missed opportunity to give us the beefier version of it. So right now, I can only judge this film based on the version they've released, and as a Snyder fan, that version is very disappointing. Starting with the things that worked though, a lot of these things are those that you would expect to be delivered on in a Snyder picture. Zack Snyder is a director that, for one, has a distinct visual and narrative style, and whether he's made superhero movies like in the Snyderverse and Watchmen, or other epics like 300, he's shown an interest in portraying both the brutality and beauty in both his stories and characters. Specifically, his characters all have deep-rooted flaws. He makes it a priority to highlight their humanity and critiques their positions. Even though Snyder's films have a huge preference for the visual and use digital VFX in stunning fashion, the characters are the heart of those stories, and without them, I don't think his work would appeal to those that it has done in contemporary culture. Before Rebel Moon came out, I said that I thought it would be interesting to see how he applies his filmmaking style to the frameworks of a full-blown science fiction action movie, one that has been a passion project of his for so many years. It started as a pitch for Star Wars and grew out into this idea for a new IP that we would expect to be, yes, inspired by the cited sources like Star Wars and Seven Samurai, but also original in some new ways too. With Rebel Moon, when it comes to the visuals, apart from a few green screen shots that don't quite land, it is a stunning film in many moments. Zack Snyder gives us his quintessential colour palette, slow-mo shots, and frames that are almost painting-like in the way they come to life, translating from those many detailed storyboards that he traditionally puts together before shooting. It does mostly look great, and that is something we've come to expect from a Snyder film. On top of this, the central character of Sofia Boutella, Cora, is one that going into part 2 and that mentioned director's cut that has definitely piqued my interest, and I'm generally on board with her character's journey for revenge. Boutella does a great job of bringing to life the emotive parts within a warrior that has so much history, and along with some of the reveals that we got throughout part 1 surrounding her character, it does make me excited to see where her arc eventually goes. On top of this, the score by Junkie XL is another solid one, and from an overall technical perspective, Zack Snyder does a good job all around. But when thinking about most of the other areas of Rebel Moon, and specifically its originality, that's where this begins to take a nosedive. The rest of the characters on show feel too thinly developed to hold a multiple part saga, the villains, including Ed Skrein Admiral, are simplistically stripped down, and the pacing of the film feels off, moving from one planet to the next as a team is put together, needing much more detail and character work to hold its own. One of my only concerns for the film going in, and I spoke about this in my video essay a few weeks back, was that by being built on very familiar foundations, it could end up being too comparative to what's come before. There is this fear that in bringing to life something that was already going to be a part of Star Wars and having visual and storytelling references there that bring up a comparison, viewers may see this as a weakness. I had hoped that this wouldn't be a problem because in the past, Snyder has done a decent job of taking many influences, bringing them together and giving us his own philosophical take on it. And that's especially true by a lot of the third acts of his films, where we get something in the narrative we didn't expect, or it ends on a unique message based on the questions of morality that the individual projects pose. That's a problem with Rebel Moon, as it takes 2 hours to get to a moment of climax, and what it does in those 2 hours, other films would be able to do in just a first act. And even that idea of table setting isn't detailed enough for this to feel purposeful. The best way to describe the film is that it feels like Seven Samurai in space, but it's a first act and doesn't do anything new or more than you would expect from its inspired sources. Yes, I know that Snyder intended for this to be samurai in space, but like with his other work, I expected at least more of a fresher outlook to some of the things happening so that it could really distinguish itself as a meaningful new brand. It's a shame because you've got all of this great talent on display like Djimon Hounsou, Anthony Hopkins and Charlie Hunnam, and I leave it feeling like I just won't remember some of these characters. And I think this is rooted down to two central problems, one being a poorly structured script and the other possibly affecting that in that again it's a shorter stripped back version of the movie we could have had. So as a whole, I'm quite disappointed with Rebel Moon Part 1, and I think the only thing that would turn my head on the project is if that longer director's cut is a much better and detailed version of the film. Right now, it's just far too similar to things we've seen before, and while I found it quite enjoyable at times, the story hasn't really interested me in the way other Snyder films have. We spend all this time on the recruitment of the team, something that could have just been the first half of Part 1 with much more characterization. It's a shame because I do think there's potential here visually from a world building sense, but it just needs that bigger bite of character work and scenes that make us connect more to these characters. It feels too much of a one-note approach to an inspired science fiction film, and that's something that I didn't want or expect from it. I will say this though, there are a few moments in the story, like the combined focus on retaliation from both opposing sides, and the scenes that make you truly support this team of rebels Rebels that do work. They make me somewhat intrigued in at least watching a part 2, and my hope is that a cut of part 1 with more detail will help flesh that out. And of course, whenever Snyder puts out a movie, I'll be there to watch it because again, I'm a fan of his style and filmmaking work. I've loved a lot of it, and one bad day at the office is common amongst nearly every filmmaker around. So while I didn't love Rebel Moon, I'm open to having a change of mind through both the next part of this journey and maybe the highlighted director's cut that's supposedly on the way. If that director's cut is as good as the extended cuts for some of his other work, then there's a chance I might like that a whole lot more. But that was my review for Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1. In many areas, Rebel Moon is definitely lacking, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement in that supposed director's cut, which Snyder said is his preferred version of the film. Again though, I don't know why they didn't just lead with that and give us the intended version right from the get-go. Joining Netflix was essentially supposed to give Snyder that freedom, and while I'm sure there will be some similar issues with that longer cut, it would just be more ideal to judge the film in its entirety. We'll have to see what happens if it does come to that, but ultimately I'm left confused and disappointed with Rebel Moon's initial version, and right now it's one of my least favourite movies in Snyder's entire filmography. I'm giving Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1 a rating of 6 out of 10. But to those who have already seen the film, what do you think of Zack Snyder's latest project, and do you agree that it's a disappointing one that could be improved by the second part or by that director's cut that Snyder has mentioned? Again, it's all subjective and I appreciate a range of reactions and reviews, so let me know down below in the comment section what you thought towards it. For much more videos and news on Zack Snyder's future movies, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, rating, and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.